Late in 2007, the world's attention was drawn to the Italian city of Perugia because of the gruesome murder of an exchange student and the perverted tales of sex games gone awry that emerged from its picturesque facade of steep mountain streets and centuries-old buildings. Meredith Kircher, a 21-year-old from Surrey, England, was sexually violated and stabbed to death, with Amanda Knox, Kircher's housemate, and Raffaella Sollecito, Knox's new boyfriend, surfacing as the prime suspects. Although unquestionable physical evidence pointed elsewhere, Italian prosecutors focused on the alleged wrongdoings of the University of Washington student, whose MySpace handle, Foxy Knoxy, spawned numerous rumors of her being a promiscuous man-eater. In today's video, we're going to give you a rundown of the case, who the real killer was, why two innocent people spent years in an Italian jail for a crime they didn't commit, and what most likely happened in this case that to this day elicits fascination among true crime enthusiasts. September 20th, 2007. Knox moves into her cottage in Perugia. The cottage, already occupied by Kircher and two Italian women in the upstairs apartment and four male students in the one below, is rumored to be in a bad neighborhood, with drug traffickers loitering near the town's basketball court. October 25th, 2007. Knox and Sollecito met at a classical music concert. After Kircher's sudden departure, Knox starts a conversation with the timid 23-year-old computer science student she referred to as an Italian Harry Potter. Later, Sollecito visits the bar Le Chic, where Knox works as a part-time bartender, setting their brief but intense relationship in motion. November 2nd, 2007. The lifeless body of Kircher is discovered. After Knox returns to the cottage late in the morning to find her roommate's door closed and an unflushed toilet in a bloodied bathroom, Italian postal police break down the door and discover a partially naked Kircher with her throat slit under a blanket. November 6th, 2007. Knox, Sollecito, and bar owner Dia Patrick Lumumba are arrested. Knox signs a confession in which she confesses to being in another room of the cottage while her Le Chic employer, Lumumba, murdered her roommate. In addition to the confession, Knox and Sollecito's problems are exacerbated by their shifting accounts of the night in question. At first, they claim to have spent the entire evening together, then they claim to have been apart for a few hours, and then they claimed they couldn't remember. November 15th, 2007. An incriminating kitchen knife was found at Sollecito's home. The blade and handle of the 8-inch knife contained traces of Kircher's and Knox's DNA, respectively. Later, Sollecito writes that he accidentally pricked Kircher's hand while they were cooking together. November 20th, 2007. Rudy Guede is arrested. Guede, a 20-year-old student from Perugia, is taken off a train in Germany after his DNA is discovered on bloody prints at the crime scene and inside the corpse of Kircher. Guede claims he had consensual intercourse, this story would change later, with Kircher that night, and was in the toilet when an unidentified male entered and murdered Kircher. Lumumba is also released from prison, but remains a suspect. January 10th, 2008. Sollecito's DNA was reportedly discovered on Kircher's bra clasp. The clasp, recovered from Kircher's room nearly 7 weeks after the murder, supports the prosecution's claim that the suspects engaged in a dangerous sex game with the victim. This late discovery of the bra clip also lent credence to the defense's criticisms of a substandard investigation and a contaminated crime scene. October 28th, 2008. Guede is sentenced to 30 years in prison. Knox and Sollecito are ordered to stand trial. Guede elected to be tried separately from the other defendants on a fast-track basis. On the same day, a magistrate decides there is sufficient evidence for Knox and Sollecito to stand trial for the murder. January 16, 2009. The Kircher murder trial begins. After 14 months in prison, Knox and Sollecito appear in court in Perugia to start their murder prosecution. June 12, 2009. Knox testifies in her defense. Knox testifies for the first time in the case that she spent the night of the murder at her boyfriend's home, where she and he smoked marijuana, made love, and fell asleep. She also refutes the allegation that she and Kircher did not get along and insisted that she only signed the confession implicating Lumumba due to intense police pressure, abuse, and threats. November 18, 2009. Guede places Knox at the crime scene. As the Knox-Solecito trial nears its conclusion, Guede makes headlines in his separate appeal with an impromptu statement describing Knox and Kircher arguing before Kircher's murder by an unidentified male. Guede's sentence is subsequently reduced to 16 years. December 4, 2009. Knox and Solecito are found guilty. After more than 50 hearings and dozens of witnesses testifying, Knox and Solecito are found guilty of murdering Kircher, with Knox receiving a 26-year sentence and Solecito receiving a 25-year sentence. In addition, the two are ordered to pay over $7 million to Kircher's family, and Knox is to pay Lumumba approximately $60,000 for defamation. June 27, 2011. The appeal begins. Guede's testimony against Knox and Solecito, his former co-defendants, is the first evidence presented in the appeal filed by Knox and Solecito. Guede also refutes a claim by another prisoner that Guede told him Knox and Solecito were innocent. July 25, 2011. Forensic experts cast doubt on the evidence. Two court-appointed experts testify that the knife allegedly used in the murder had no trace of blood and that there was no DNA on the bra clasp used by police to implicate Solecito. October 3, 2011. Knox and Solecito's convictions are overturned. A jury of 6 citizens and 2 appellate justices overturned Knox and Solecito's convictions. March 26, 2013. Italy's highest court orders a new trial. The Italian Court of Cassation overturns the acquittal and reopens the case. Knox, who had since returned to Seattle, Washington, and was preparing to publish a book about her ordeal, denounced the ruling, saying, "When the prosecution's theory of my involvement in Meredith's murder has been repeatedly revealed to be completely unfounded and unfair." September 30, 2013. The retrial begins. A new trial begins in Florence without Knox and Solecito present, 3 months after the Court of Cassation criticizes the deficiencies, contradictions, and illogical conclusions of the appeals court. January 30, 2014. Knox and Solecito are re-convicted of murder. After 11.5 hours of deliberation, a jury convicts Knox and Solecito for a second time, with the judge increasing Knox's sentence by 2.5 years. Solecito is required to give up his passport, while Knox, who was in Seattle, would not be extradited unless the ruling was upheld. March 27, 2015. The convictions are again overturned. The Court of Cassation concludes the lengthy legal saga by reversing Knox and Solecito's convictions, except for Knox's defamation of Lumumba. Knox said she was extremely relieved and grateful for the outcome. Many believe there is literally no way Amanda Knox could have committed the murder of Meredith Kircher. Despite this, Amanda Knox spent nearly 4 years in an Italian jail for an offense she clearly did not commit. So, how did this miscarriage of justice happen? 3 aspects of the case were responsible: the soon-to-be convicted killer, the prosecutor, and the press. When we put these 3 together, we can understand why this became an international phenomenon in the realm of true crime. Rudy Guede. Rudy Herman Guede, born in Abidjan, Ivory Coast, was 20 years old at the time of the murder. He had been living in Perugia since he was 5 years old. Guede was raised in Italy with the help of school teachers, a local cleric, and others. His relationship with his father was strained, and his father's eventual decision to return to the Ivory Coast forced Guede into social services in 2004. Guede was adopted by an affluent Perugian family when he was 17 years old. In mid-2007, his adoptive family asked him to leave their home. This was possibly due to his many run-ins with the authorities. Guede allegedly committed burglaries, including one in which he entered a lawyer's office through a second-floor window, and another in which he robbed a residence and brandished a pocket knife when caught. Guede was apprehended in Milan on October 27, 2007, after breaking into a primary school and was reportedly discovered with a stolen 11-inch knife from the school's kitchen. This occurred days before Kircher's murder. Guede met Kircher through the four men who lived in a flat below Knox and Kircher's apartment on Via della Pergola 7. Giacomo Silenzi, one of these men, had known Guede for a year before Kircher's murder and met Guede while playing basketball on the court above the Via della Pergola residence. Guede had visited Silenzi's home on multiple occasions while Knox and Meredith were also visiting. Evidently, Guede was attracted to Knox, who was single and unattached when they first met. Guede purportedly ran into Kircher on 3 or 4 occasions before her murder. On October 31, 2007, the night before the murder, Kircher and Guede apparently kissed on the dance floor of a nightclub. The next evening, Kircher invited Guede to her home. Police would only learn of Guede's involvement after his DNA was found at the crime scene. Investigators tried to contact him after finding Guede's DNA at the crime scene, but Guede had fled to Germany, where he was stopped while trying to board a train without a ticket and extradited back to Italy. When back in Italy, Guede's nonsensical accounts of the night Kircher was killed would come out. Guede testified that he and Kircher arranged to meet at her home around 8:30 p.m. on the night of the murder. The two were intimate that evening, but did not engage in sexual activity due to the absence of condoms. Guede contends that when Meredith discovered her rent money was missing, she became enraged and accused Knox of stealing it. Guede then used the restroom with his iPhone headphones on, at which point he heard Meredith scream and rushed back to the bedroom, where he discovered that a man had stabbed her and fled, declaring, "Black man found, black man guilty," as the man fled the apartment. Guede claims he tried to clean up Meredith's blood with a towel after the incident. Around 11:30 p.m., he gave up and went to a friend's home. He then went to a nightclub, where he remained until around 4:30 a.m. Why didn't Guede contact the authorities? Did Guede kill Kircher? The evidence against Guede is extensive and extremely incriminating. His DNA was discovered in the room, in Meredith's body, and on her clothing. His fingerprints and shoe prints were also found in the room. His feces and DNA were discovered in one of the bathrooms. His shoe prints and bloodied footprint were discovered in the house's entryway and in another bathroom. Despite not having any money, he fled to Germany. This can be rationally explained by the unaccounted for rent money that went missing from the property. No physical evidence whatsoever linked Knox to the murder room. It is unfathomable that Knox could have committed such a vicious homicide and left no physical evidence, whereas Guede managed to leave a substantial quantity of physical evidence. Solecito's DNA was only discovered on the clasp of a bra, along with unidentified DNA. The cause for Solecito's DNA was almost certainly contamination during the forensic team's incompetent investigation of the crime scene. Glass was discovered in Guede's shoe that matched the glass in the apartment's shattered window, lending credence to the hypothesis that he broke into the apartment. Guede opted for an expedited closed-door trial with no reporters present. The court determined that his account of the events did not match the scientific evidence, and he was convicted of murder and sexual assault and sentenced to 30 years in prison in October 2008. Guede initially said that Knox had not been in the apartment at the time of the murder, but he later altered his narrative to say that she had been there. He claimed to have heard her arguing with Kircher and seen Knox's silhouette outside the home after peering out a window. 3 weeks after Knox and Solecito's convictions, Guede's prison term was reduced from 30 to 24 years before the automatic 1/3 reduction for the expedited prosecution, resulting in a final sentence of 16 years. Meredith Kircher's murder was an open and shut case. Rudy Guede was found guilty of homicide by an Italian court. Why did the authorities have such a fixation on Amanda and her boyfriend? Douglas Preston, an author, explained it perfectly by saying, "What happened was that he announced to the world prematurely that he had found the killer, and then, 2 weeks later, they found the real killer. And instead of being able to admit his mistake, he and his The police spent an entire year collecting evidence to try to prove that Amanda Knox was somehow connected with this actual killer. The he Preston was referring to was Giuliano Menini, the Italian prosecutor in the Kircher case with a history of fabricating conspiracy theories of satanic sex murders. According to the prosecution, Knox assaulted Kircher in her room, repeatedly striking her head against a wall, holding her face and trying to strangle her. Mignini suggested Knox had taunted Kircher and may have said, "You acted the goody-goody so much, now we are going to show you. Now you're going to be forced to have sex." The prosecution hypothesized that Guede, Knox and Sollecito, who were Satanists playing a sex game, had removed Kircher's jeans and held her on her hands and knees while Guede sexually abused her, that Knox had cut Kircher with a knife before inflicting the fatal stab wound, and that she had then stolen Kircher's mobile phones and cash to stage a burglary. One internet article described Giuliano Mignini in the following unflattering way. As a public prosecutor in the Italian town of Perugia, he has made a spectacle of himself by turning high-profile criminal cases into carnivalesque farces. He fancies himself a kind of grand inquisitor charged with the sacred duty of exposing secret cults and sordid sex rituals and Satan worshippers. He figures a criminal prosecution can proceed based on wild accusations and sensational theories rather than solid evidence. He likes to throw his weight around by intimidating suspects, witnesses, and journalists. He is eager to sue or threaten to arrest anybody who dares to publicly disagree with him. When the Knox case came along, it was the perfect opportunity for Mignini to regain professional dignity. But he failed miserably. Mignini had no physical evidence to prove Knox's guilt, nor did he have a motive. When DNA evidence placed petty thief and drug dealer Guede squarely at the murder scene, Mignini doubled down and argued that Knox, Sollecito and Guede had all taken part in the crime, killing Kircher during a drug-fueled sex game that culminated in a Halloween ritual sacrifice. When Mignini lacked proof, he allowed his imagination to run rampant with stories of satanic orgies. The last of our trio on what likely happened in this case was the most damaging of all. The prosecution used the media from the very outset of the case to put together its case against Knox and Sollecito. The overwhelming volume of disinformation released created a prejudicial ambience at the first trial, where jurors could read newspapers, watch television, and discuss the case with friends and family. Some press reports were so ludicrous that they were hard to believe, but the public and jurors gobbled them up. One went as far as fabricating forensic evidence. A fingerprint found on the British student murdered in Italy shows her American housemate held her down as she was attacked, it was alleged. The arrest warrant for Amanda Knox, 20, discloses that her print was discovered on the face of Meredith Kircher, who was found in her bed with her throat cut, a respected Italian newspaper claims. This case was a worldwide sensation that shouldn't have been. What most likely happened? Guede raped, killed, and robbed Meredith Kircher. Giuliano Mignini jumped the gun and accused Knox and Sollecito, and due to his inflated ego and already tarnished reputation, tried to insert them into Guede's crime. The international press unintentionally helped Mignini in his smear campaign and prosecution of Knox. Rudy Guede is now a free man, having served his 16-year sentence, and still maintains that Knox was involved. If you love our content and want to support the channel, feel free to check our web shop where you can find exclusive true crime merch brought to you by Bad Things.